Alright guys, excuse me. Hello everyone. Yep, that's my new intro. Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Today is core day 2, activity day. Gonna move around a little bit today and just kind of continue talking about some of the normal or traditional activities that we were doing at the end of day 1. And so we're gonna start off with leg lift. So everybody's usually done some form or shape of a leg lift, and so we're just going to talk about a few options today. So a normal leg lift is here, whatever, maybe hands underneath the butt, who knows. And honestly, those aren't too bad. Again, I would say it's unfortunate that the emphasis a lot of times ends up being on the hip flexors, but my spine is in a pretty happy position there. As far as cheating or putting your hands underneath your butt to maintain a stable position, not really a problem for me. If that helps us stay safe and have a happier spine, I say go for it. So leg lifts, a few different ways that we can do them while keeping the back happy and while challenging the midsection. We can absolutely do sort of like the stereotypical reps of maybe like an isometric hold at the bottom or normal reps. I would say a couple things on normal reps. One would be we don't want to go so low that it promotes arching and movement at the pelvis. So if you can't get down there without your hips totally like kind of popping a wheelie, don't go down that low. Shrink your range of motion. And if you're coming up here and you have to cheat to get your feet vertical, then just shrink your range of motion. Go from where you can work to where you can work. I don't know, there's not really a prize for tapping your feet against the ground or getting that fully vertical position right there. But if you want to get a lot of hard work in and maintain a good posture, you can just work right in there. What are some other options there? Well, you can go alternating, and honestly, alternating like this is a great way to boost not only stability and activation of the core, but also potentially going to get a little bit of hip mobility out of it from holding one position and forcing the other leg to relax and lower down. You're going to go into a range of motion that you're probably not typically going into. Again, I'm going to support my hands underneath my butt. If I think there's some fatigue or if I can't maintain a good posture, no problem. Some other options we have are, just doing some circles in one direction or the other direction, spelling out the alphabet, capital letters, maybe a little bit of cursive. I don't know, you mix it up, have some fun with it. Reverse crunch, so this is a little bit more dynamic, and again, it's not that we can't leave. It's not that our spine is some precious little thing that can never go in away from neutral position. I would just vote that we stay there in the majority of time. So if we have some movements that pull us out of that neutral position, that's okay. So a reverse crunch right there, getting a lot of stress through the midsection. We can go figure 4 style, same thing. In fact, that one actually gets a little bit harder because you're actually getting some resistance. This top leg is going to provide some resistance, and you have to do extra reps if you want to have to be even on both sides. So not a bad idea to do the figure 4 style as well. Dead bugs. So this is an awesome progression, and we're going to go through a handful of progressions on the dead bug. So dead bug base position, just laying on the ground. And actually, our first step here, we are going to perform just a single crunch. And so we're going to hold this crunch, and so we'll get to do some work with it. We'll get to do some work in this crunch position, but because we're not going in and out of the crunch the whole time, we're sparing the spine. We're reducing the amount of unnecessary flexion and extension on the spine. So we're just coming up once and maintaining a tight belly the whole time Anytime you're up in this position, you want a tight belly. And I'm kind of looking over at you guys, and I'm doing a little bit extra with my neck, but I really want you guys to just try to maintain a stable and neutral neck as much as possible. We don't necessarily want the neck doing a whole lot of work here. So on this dead bug, our base position is just going to be to crunch up here. And then position 2 would be 2 limbs right there. And we can alternate finding our position. And again, this is just kind of silly, and it's just something you can do to warm up into the next progressions. No, this isn't necessarily hard. And what you should also be doing during all this movement is belly breathing. So that's going to get real interesting as you're belly breathing with a tight abdomen in that crunch hold position. And then our next position here, we're going to go from base to 4 limbs up, 4 limbs down, 4 limbs up, 4 limbs down, 4 limbs up, 4 limbs down. Next position, going to come up, going to go back to 2 limbs. This time, let me scoot forward a little bit here. 2 limbs, so I'm crunched up, 2 limbs up, breath in, hold the breath, extend limbs. Now even when my limbs are extended, I'm still crunched up, my head, my shoulder are still off the ground. And I'm going to start to exhale and bring those limbs back in. Still exhaling, still exhaling, still exhaling, still exhaling, and then relax. Inhale in, hold the breath, extend the limbs, exhale, 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 and relax. And we can come up, limbs up, extend the opposites, bring them back in. And working our way up. Now it's the whole shebang. All 4 limbs at the same time. Yeah, even just showing those movements to you guys, my belly is talking to me. So if you're breathing with it, that's going to give you so much more abdominal and core activation. Don't forget to pair your breathing with your movement. Looking at my cheat sheet over here. Those are some dead bug variations, and you can also kind of spice it up and mix in some banded variations for either leg lifts or to do your dead bugs. So we will do a band resisted leg lift to start, and yes, you can tie some bands down and do band resisted leg lifts on your legs if you want to, but from the upper body creates some interesting tension as well. So think about having a strap up and back behind you, tightening that down, legs are up and high, and you can go alternating. You can go both, all the same movements that we've done in the other variation. We can now add a different dimension to it, and those are way more interesting and a little bit harder. So you're going to be doing quite a bit more stability work with that band pulling you in the opposite direction. So figure out a way to try those out. And even when I have group training going on, whether it's with teams or otherwise, I'll just have one partner kind of half kneel or stand behind the other partner, and they kind of just provide that resistance, whereas the worker bee is down on their back and their hands are right there. So that partner behind them, if we don't have a good band set up, you just have a partner go in and provide, say, around 20 pounds of tug of war kind of resistance there, and that does a great job of picking on them and challenging them. And again, so far we're doing a whole lot of anterior core, but a little bit of the posterior. Just a reminder, throwing in glute bridges, especially if you're doing a lot of floor work like this, throwing in some glute bridges, not a bad idea. Let's go through just a few variations real quickly. I know we've done a couple of them already on our lower body pull day, but if we're just on the ground here, driving off the heels, squeezing those glutes. And again, the goal here is glute activation. We don't necessarily want to go as high as possible. You know, after coaching people, coaching Q, I would say, get those hips in the air as high as they can go, as high as they can go. And I'd see people up on their toes, arching their back, getting as high as possible, listening to what I was saying, but not doing what I was intending. So think about maybe even picking those toes up off the ground. And the goal is not to go as high as possible, only to squeeze the glutes as tight as possible. So with the glutes, with the height, the higher we go, at some point, your glutes are going to cease, they've already fired, and the athlete is just going to start to activate their spinal erectors, and that's going to help them go into that arching position to actually get just a little bit higher. They think they're doing the right thing, but what they're really doing is training their body to use the lower back for hip extension. Yes, it's going to play a little bit of an assisting role, a synergistic role on that, but really what we want to do is just stabilize with the lower back, but we want that hip extension to come from the glutes. Those big old meaty fat glutes instead of the thin little erector muscles around the spine, right? That's a good way to strain your back, is to train those lower back muscles to be firing all the time when you are performing movement. So they should be there to stabilize, but not so much for hip extension. They should not be performing that. So just normal bridges, and a lot of times I'll talk about athletes having a belt buckle, so like a big old belt buckle, and I'll talk about keeping that belt buckle at the top and maybe going into a marching variation. And I'll say, I don't want your belt buckle to move. I don't want your belt buckle to drop or to dance around. So even though you're marching, just taking little 1 to 2 inch marches, and you're doing your best job to keep that belt buckle frozen in place right where it is. You got to watch out for even demonstrating this. I was tempted to drive off of my elbows to create like a better video to prove to all you guys that I had a super stable core. But what you really want to do is be fighting. So as I lift that bottom foot, that glute is going to fire. And not only is it creating extension, which is keeping the hips up, but it's also going to be fighting external rotation as the hips want to drop and drift. So that belt buckle, keeping that belt buckle up and stable on the march is a great coaching cue. It seems to teach people what I want to teach them without too much speaking or long explanations. You can also just do unilateral for some of the same benefits. Figure 4. Driving off that heel. Maybe even be on the outside of the foot a little bit. And the variations are endless. You can do sort of like a frog style, sole to sole on the outside of your foot. You can go long legs and there, your booty's just barely getting off of the ground, but it does talk to you in a little bit different way. And since you're lengthening that lever, it instantly gets harder. So if you feel like you get nothing out of a normal glute bridge, straightening your legs out might be a smart decision for you. And once the legs are straight, you can actually play around with your foot angle as well. So if I turn my feet outward, then I have sort of pre-activated my glutes. And I'm not necessarily straight-legged, but I'm darn near it. And all I'm doing right there is just basically getting my glutes barely off the ground. So some hollow hold positions. We've done the planks. We already, in our last video, we did some planking. And let's say somebody has a shoulder injury and they can't plank, or they can't normally plank. The hollow hold is an interesting kind of twisted variation that really, really trains an athlete on core stability and just picks on them in a different way. If you want your belly to burn, this is an awesome one. It's going to promote neutral spine and core stability. And all we're going to do, there's a small bend in the knees, a small bend in the hips, but all we're doing is just locking the hips into place and just rocking back and forth. I'm going to tap my heels, I'm going to tap my mid-back, I'm back and forth. I was already starting to shake a little bit there. And I'm going to cheat and say that I'm going to use an excuse that I'm trying to show you guys what to do. And that's why my hands were up here. But when your hands are forward, it's so much easier. So I would say if you're really, really struggling, your hands would almost be resting on your thighs. If you really had to cheat, they'd kind of be under, and you can use some bicep to fake some core stability. But this is easiest. Hands across the chest, a little bit harder. Hands overhead, hardest. And there's some variations in between. You can do one arm back, other arm back, arms out to the side. You can play around with all sorts of variations. So I have the regular hollow hold. Essentially what kind of looks like a can opener. Do some reps there. And if you guys are doing some sets of these, a set of about 15 to 20 usually works or does the trick. And you're doing reps, but your reps are really just, you have almost no range of motion. You don't really have any joints articulating. They're just barely moving to allow to move your center of gravity forward and backwards. So it's really just time. So you can do reps, you can do true reps, or if you find yourself sort of cheating because it's so dang tough, maybe go for time. And I would say this is a movement where it looks easy, and then people get humbled really quickly. So I've worked with male wrestlers for years, and these guys tend to be small, lean, and tough. And when you show them that hollow rock, you get all kinds of eye rolling, but then they go in and do it, and around rep 15 or 20 out of a set of 30, they start getting humble real quick because they'll start shaking. If they're doing it right, it's gonna be a grind. That's a great challenge that you can do any place, anytime with no equipment, and you can do it with varying levels of fitness and wellness. So our little old ladies can do it, and our young competitive gyms can do it as well. Yes, you can add weight to it, but I personally have never needed to. But if you've got that outstanding core, if you're that next level kind of athlete, adding weight, you can put some weight in the feet, or you can hold some weight up on the chest. I don't know if that necessarily makes it that much harder, but it will challenge you. It will be a challenge for sure. So that's going to be that rock. Now we're going to start to sort of trickle into a phase in this video of we're going to talk about anti-movements. So the crunch The crunch is a flexion exercise. The dead bug is sort of an anti-flexion exercise, because as I'm doing all this other movement, all my spine wants to do is extend. So did I say anti-flexion? Yeah, it's anti-flexion. So, excuse me, it's anti-extension, because I'm flexed and all my spine wants to do in this flex position is extend. So in the hollow rock and in the dead bug, those are anti-extension movements, as opposed to the traditional mindset of core work where it's do a bunch of flexions or do a bunch of extensions. So the anti-thought process is where we're going to emphasize stability against resistance. So we already did, let's see, we did a dead bug, we did some hollow variations. So we've done some of our anti-extensions. Well, what would be some of our anti-flexions? Like a back squat, a back squat, some Superman holds. So coming down, you can do Superman holds in a variety of spaces, up and pause and hold. And gravity wants you to flex the spine, but we're doing anti-flexion exercises. And so what we're doing with these exercises is promoting stability. And again, a neutral spine position, very important, but we're not such delicate creatures that we can't occasionally involve some movement in our core work. You're going to be moving your core, you're going to be getting in awkward and sort of uncontrolled positions in sport. So it's good to do it a little bit ahead of time so that you're not some rickety old rigid bag of bones when you're out there trying to be an athlete and all of a sudden you're moving around. So just a reminder, we have our planes of movement. Sagittal plane of movement is just forward and backwards. So that's what we're in when we're just walking forwards, when we're squatting, when we're deadlifting, when we're doing a lot of just normal lunging. That's our sagittal plane. Our frontal plane would be like shuffling side to side, or maybe performing a lateral lunge. And then our transverse plane is when we are rotating throughout movements. So think about maybe a lateral lunge with a rotation. We'll do some pulley system core movements here soon, and we'll get into more of our rotation exercises and anti-rotation exercises. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about let's just go to that. All right, here we go. Movie magic. And okay, so far what we've talked about has mostly to do with anti-flexion and extension. A lot of it was laying on our back, and what we want to do is grow our ability to take all of that really secluded and isolated work that's taking place as we're laying down. We want to find a way to transition that to a standing position. So you have quite a few options there. I'd say my favorite is a Turkish get-up. I'm going to try to do a couple reps here and to kind of demo that a little bit. But once we find a way to maybe transition that up, so if you had somebody who's returning, maybe doing a return to sport program, so they got hurt and we're really babying them at first with some of the stability movements at the bottom, and then we want to progress them to standing and get them to do some anti-rotation work, some rotation work. Here's how we do it, is maybe just the Turkish get-up. So you can take any kind of weight, or you can even take your fist and bounce your shoe on top of it. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to start laying down. Okay, so I've got that weight up. Right hand is high. I've got my right knee back. Left arm is out at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to press off that right heel and sit up on my left elbow. I'm going to press onto my left hand. From my left hand to my right foot, I'm going to do a big old glute bridge. Get my hips high. Once there, that left leg is going to weave down and under. I'm going to brace from there up. I'm going to stand tall. And I'm going to bring it back down in reverse. Right there. So that's your Turkish get up. It's an outstanding movement. It's challenging multiple planes of motion. It's challenging the core from horizontal to vertical and every angle in between. So take some time to do a few Turkish get-ups on each arm. If you don't have any weight with you, take your shoe off, make a fist, and balance that shoe on top of your fist. Okay, let's go through some of our pulley options here. For the Pallof press, I'm going to come out from that, oh, my band is catching just a little bit. From that Pallof press, for the Pallof press, I have some preferences. One thing I prefer to have my inside hand on the handle first. My outside hand is going to come in and do a support grip around that. Another thing I prefer is to be down in a squat athletic position. And the third thing I prefer is to have a 90-degree angle. Think about having a laser beam come out of the center of your chest, and where it meets up with the cable coming out from the machine, you want about a 90-degree angle, right? Kind of a sharp 90-degree angle like that. And that's sort of like your push point or your hold point. And you can do reps right there. Or you can go out here and you can hold for time. Or as usual, you can hold for breaths. So that's an anti-rotation. The whole time I'm performing that movement, the weight and the pull wants to drag me back towards it, but I don't let it, right? You can also do rotational movements. I'm not a huge fan of the two-handed chop. I think it's one of the best for actually loading the core and maybe getting that burn feeling or that muscular development sensation. But that movement, not super applicable.